do you believe we are training enough writers, loving our writers enough, giving them enough credit?
Not at all. I don't believe that at all. This whole nepotism, insider, outsider, these kind of things, according to me, are like a sajish on the industry. I really, take me. Okay, I've come from Assam. I made my first film before Zoya made her first film. I think that failure is the first step to success. Because when you look back, retrospect is always 2020.
Yeah.
But when you constantly kind of, like they say, success has many fathers and failure has none. But I think failure teaches you a lot more than success. I bunked school and went and watched Mira, Salaam, Bombay. And that film had the most tremendous impact on me. I literally went in as an audience and came out as a director.
Now the stars, like you said, are actually asking for so much that they throw the entire budget of the film out the window.
I think the kind of pressure that they're putting on budgets, it's ridiculous. Nepotism thing that we speak about. I mean, let me ask you, when the first promo came out, we introduced 7 kids. But nobody even remembered the other 4's names.
Yeah.
And all you wanted to talk about were the 3 people.
The 3. Yeah. When you write these characters, is there someone in your office saying, oh, this is going to turn into a controversy?
I'm not going to lie about it. If, there are, at the end of it, before coming out, you could have partners who might call things out.
You and Zoya have been working together now for, do you know how long it's been? 15 years?
Our fights are always creative. So like when we were writing Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara, the neighbors call Honey Auntie, Zoya's mother, because we were writing at home. And they were like, Honey, aapka ghar mein sab theek hai? Because we were shouting at each other so much. So Honey Auntie was like, if you're going to shout like this, go to the office and write. So yeah, we do. Also, we're friends, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so we have all the mutual disrespect that friends have for each other.
So, Reema, thank you so much for coming in to speak with me. From the excuse of Superboys of Malegaon, we've got you into the studio. Great film. It's a love letter to filmmaking from a filmmaker who loves filmmaking.
Something like that.
Something like that. And it reminds me of, everything you've done up till now has been such real characters. It feels like you would have met these people in the course of your life at some point. And that's always been the feeling that I've had about, the work that you've done in your career. So I'm really glad we've had this opportunity to chat. And we'll get to the film in a bit. But whenever I watch, and I watched every single thing you worked on in your career, but whenever I watch your work, I always wonder how you write these characters. And I know that you have help and people work together, but is there a formula with which you arrive at characters who are so real and so grey? Because none of them is purely white and none of them is purely black. Like, for example, Safina from Gully Boys is like one of my favorite characters in film altogether.
Yeah. I think they feel real because they are grey.
Yeah.
Because no one is all good or all bad. Well, most people are not extremely, good or bad. People are grey. So I think that's what adds to the realism when your characters are also grey. Like in Superboys of Malegaon, just to use an example, Nasir, extremely, extremely inspirational guy, charming, and he's just a really sweet guy also. But at the same time, when he wears the director hat, he's not, he goes into a grey zone because you do tend to think only of your film and not of the people who are making the film, So in that sense, I think, or Safina, like you mentioned, Safina is really interesting because she, we decided to give her a bit of a crazy, violent kind of
like a tempo.
Suddenly she spikes.
Yeah.
But then that also comes from, I guess she was, like she's at home being slapped and things like that. It's coming from the violence that probably was, done to her.
Do you have these characters who live with you waiting for a project to find a home in? So Nasser obviously is a real person. You've met him, and then you just had to turn him into a character. But the others,
I mean, most of the time it's an idea that grabs either me or Zoya, and then we start building it, and we start building the themes and the characters to kind of evoke the idea that grabs you. So I think characters come. Maybe characters are really just the first step, unless it's something like this, which is based on a person.
You did say about it, when you're especially working on this film, it is a lot about the writing. The writer is the spine, the heart of film, and that's brought up a lot of questions about how writers are currently being treated in our industry. Writer baap hota hai, basically. So I remember you would also mention this several times about the fact that in any project, there's the director, there's the producer, there's the writer. Do you believe we are training enough writers, loving our writers enough, giving them enough credit?
Not at all. I don't believe that at all. There was a kind of a, I think that Javed Saab and Salaam Saab were, that was the height of a writer's place in this industry. And it's kind of interesting. I was, Farhan and I were at this thing yesterday, and he said that it's almost like it's systemic. And since then, people have said we'll never allow that to happen again.
Yeah.
And there's been systems kind of put in place to keep writers down. In terms of, you don't pay them, you don't give them credit. There's no respect. And you'll see who respects their writers the minute you see the credits of a film. It's very demoralizing, I think, to the community. Because right now, SWA is doing great work. Anjum Rajabali is with the SWA. They're kind of trying to ensure certain basics for writers. When I saw the basic fee that they're proposing for a new writer, for a film that may not be a very high budget film, I was horrified. That's one part of the problem. The second part of the problem is credits. Credits are rarely given to the person who's actually written the film. Because what happens is 2-3 people sit in a room and they talk. So you might have a producer, you might have a director, you might even have a senior writer. And then you have a junior writer in the room. All 4 people talk for about 2 to 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. Then the junior writer goes away, writes for 2-3 months, comes back. But everybody in that room gets shared credit, and this poor writer his name will come right in the end. So when you do things like this, it's massive disrespect. It's demoralizing. And you're not nurturing, you're in fact doing the opposite. And though people realize the value of writing more and more, I think, there's a lot of space for improvement.
So even in Malika, it was written by Varun Grover, who's completely brilliant.
He is.
And you sought him out. You knew that this is the guy you wanted to write this film.
Yeah. Because, this is the first time in, I think, my career that I'm, directing somebody else's writing.
Oh, because we've always
written. I think Zoya's one of her short films, Last Story, was written by Ruchika Oberoi. But by and large, we always write our own work, and probably that's why we are not, we didn't suffer the same fate as a lot of other writers. So Varun was, we had just started Tiger Baby, and very swamped with writing all our projects. So, and Superboys was something that we've been wanting to do for so long. So we were like, we have to collaborate with somebody. So we got Varun on to write it for us, because we both, love his work and love his vibe. And we all kind of, I think, in terms of worldview, sit on the same side of the fence. So yeah, he was a unanimous decision for us.
So let's go back to the beginning of this film. Why did you decide to do it? What about the story really struck you? How many years of gestation has this been, in the works for?
This one has been in the works for a while. So it all kind of started, for me, it started when Zoya came back from Delhi. She had gone for the Ocean Film Festival, and she said that, have you seen this documentary, Faiza's documentary? And she sent me some links. There was newspaper articles, there was I think some TV channels had done spots on him. So she sent me that kind of stuff, and then I watched the documentary. And she said, I met this guy, and he's it's kind of funny because, Zoya spotted him at the foyer and she recognized him and went up to speak to him. And he recognized her and he said, I know who you are. I've ripped off a lot of your father's films. And it's kind of interesting because he actually did that. His first film was a rip-off of Sholay.
Sholay, yeah.
A spoof of Sholay. And today it's kind of gone full circle. And the children of the man who wrote, half of Sholay at least, are producing a movie on Nasir. Yeah. So it's kind of gone full circle. But yeah, that's when it kind of started. And Zoya said that, I was talking to him and this is a feature film. There's so much more to the story. Because the documentary kind of very charming and we are fans of it. And we've given the documentary a shout out in the credits of the film.
Yes.
It's about the making of one film. But for us, in terms of, we've made the film like a 10-12 year period where we are looking at the genesis of Nasir and the support that he had from his friends and the community that he kind of represented in his films, and that and they eventually made it a success because the film did so well in these video parlors. There were about 14-15 video parlors in town. And Nasir's family owned one of those video parlors. So he actually initially just intended to make a film and show it in his video parlor. But it started doing so well that other parlors started picking it up. And because of that, other people started making films. So a kind of a parallel video film industry started in Malegaon. Quite inadvertently. So, as a lover of cinema, this was it was just a unique and lovely story to kind of get into for me as a director.
Have you ever had a moment where you're like, how do I get the best out of this person? Have you ever had a moment in your career where you were just like, nahi ho pa raha hai?
Yeah, I think I've had several of those. I mean, without taking names, but I was on set, you do have access to a mic and you use it to set the frame and stuff. But I normally never communicate to actors on the mic. Yeah. And, even if I want them to do something different, I do go up to them after cutting, because it's a very private space, and actors are very vulnerable. So you can't do that to them. I think it's unfair to do that to them, have a very public conversation about how to better your performance in the next take. But I was with this actor who needed to cry and needed to break down, but wasn't being able to do it. Was kind of hanging on to some kind of calmness and was very composed and was saying things like, no, only Mr. Bachchan looks good when he cries. So, I did about 2-3 takes and I knew that I needed a lot more vulnerability and I was at my wit's end. What do I do? So finally I just picked up the mic and I was like, that was horrible. Let's do it again. And that's all I did. And then the next take just came out perfect because I think I had psychologically completely
jolted that person.
Yeah, and that showed in the take. So you have to do sometimes you have to evoke a performance when reason is not working.
So, I mean, obviously when you came to the city, and we know the story of when you were AD at Lagan, but what happened between landing in Mumbai and becoming AD Lagan? How did you get there?
I was in school in Delhi and my father was really wanting me to do an MBA and stuff like that. And I, by that time, had already caught the film bug, which actually came very suddenly. I was always a writer. I thought I'll do an MBA and help my father with his business and be a writer on the side.
Yeah.
So that was my plan somewhere around, when I was a teenager. And I bunked school and went and watched Mira, Salaam, Bombay. And that film had the most tremendous impact on me. I literally went in as an audience and came out as a director. Because when the end credits were rolling, something popped in my head. I was just like, oh my God, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Okay.
It was very sudden, very strong. So I immediately decided not to do 11th and 12th in school.
Okay.
And moved to Bombay.
That's a gutsy decision.
Yeah. And also because it's junior college in Bombay. So less rigid and regulated. I was, really wanting to spread my wings. So I moved to Bombay and kind of joined a film club, started working as an AD on ads, that kind of stuff.
She moved at 17, 16, 17?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
I think I was 17. And then applied to film school in India several times, got rejected several times, and just started working, aiding on films. So I worked with Rajat Kapoor, I worked with Kaizad Gustad, Farhan, Ashutosh, did a small stint with Mira, which was great.
Yeah, nice full circle there.
Yeah, and then Zoya and me wrote a short film for Mira too. So
no, but forgive me, I want to take you back a step, because when you're at 17 and you've come to this giant city, which is obviously very different from where you grew up, very easy to get lost in the noise, and then to get repeatedly rejected from film school. How do you convince yourself? How did you convince yourself at that point that no, I'm going to stay at this. I'm not going to give up, or maybe it's not for me?
I don't know. I just so loved it that I wanted to do it. It was just for the love of it, I think.
So there was no thought of, screw it, I'll just go back and get that MBA.
No thought at all. But what my dad insisted was that he's like, if you're not getting into FTI or any other film school, you have to do something. So I did the social media course at SCM at Sapphire Polytechnic.
Right.
And that 1 year was actually very, very helpful to me. So we had Jarumullah, who is still one of my heroes. And we had a bunch of other people, industry people coming in. P. Sainath and, just people who opened my world.
P. Sainath opened my worldview also.
Yeah.
He's just amazing, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's a North Star in a very confused world. Yeah.
So though I was like initially, feeling very rebellious and irritated with my father for insisting, he's like, just get some form of training, something, And also like not a film family, completely removed. So he was saying things like, you're smart, we've educated you, what is wrong with you? Why do you want to do this? That kind of stuff. So, but I'm really glad they insisted, and I'm really glad for that 1 year, which kind of gave me a basic idea about how not just film, but media works, And from there, I met Rajat Kapoor, who was doing a film called Private Detective. It was a terribly low-budget movie. So I was in every department, Like I assisted the director, I assisted the editor, I, went, I even assisted Rasool on sound for a bit.
Oh.
Yeah. There's a really funny story where Rasool and I were both, like you're saying, people out of Bombay.
Yeah.
We needed to go and shoot some early morning birds. And we decided to go to Malabar Hill, not realizing that there are not that many birds there. And there was a car kind of coming down the hill, and Rasool's like, I need the sound of this car for something else. And so he had a mic that kind of looked a bit like a gun. So he turned and pointed it to the car, and about 5 minutes later, a police van came and arrested us. Yeah. It was very funny. I mean, they let us go once they realized it was a mic. And
not a good place to point things at people in Malabar Hill, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, that film made me kind of learn a lot, like hit all the departments on a level. So, in that sense, I think Private Detective was a huge part of me just learning what filmmaking was. And Rajat was a very patient teacher.
It's interesting because when I was doing in Bangalore, we called it pre-university college, which is your 11th and 12th. And my sister had just topped the university with an MBA, and my mom really wanted me to do the MBA. And I was studying commerce, and I decided to become a journalist, and I switched to arts and studied journalism instead. And then you get older and you're running businesses and you're running Tiger Baby now. And so much of it suddenly becomes business administration, where people are showing you Excel sheets and people are showing you numbers, and you're managing like human resources, and you're like, eventually we all become MBAs.
Well, I think on a level that maybe with Zoya and me, we're not practical people in that sense. And, normally companies have a creative person and a person who has that.
Who's running the business, who's doing the business.
The thing is, we run the business, but neither of us have that thing, and we take very emotional
decisions.
If something connects to us, we think it's the thing to do.
So you don't have a suit constantly telling you, like, this is not going to work out.
No.
It's not making sense on the Excel sheet.
No, not. So we work really differently. If we get an idea, then if we love it, then we figure out a way to do it. And do it in a way that's viable.
Speaking of filmmaking and making it viable, I was having a conversation with someone who said that the way films or stories are getting greenlit now is different because the OTT platforms have come in and they're controlling a lot of the juice of what gets greenlit. So a lot of people wait to sign on an OTT. And because you're waiting to sign on an OTT, there are only certain kinds of projects that are getting signed on. Do you agree with that? In some way, that it is at least changed the way business is being done?
Well, it's definitely changed the way business is being done. I can't deny that. But I think we're still in a very strong star system. So if you have a bankable actor if you've cast a bankable actor,
will automatically come.
Yeah.
Because
exactly
the opening that this actor can most likely deliver to you.
Yeah. Now, whether it's a small film, medium budget, big film, if you have that, you're home. If you don't have that, but you still really believe in your project and you are willing to kind of scrape the bottom of the barrel and still go out and make it, and you even end up kind of making a good film, it's very hard to kind of put it out there in terms of theatrically, which is why I think people are reaching out for partnerships and things like that. I think that OTT, by and large, has given a huge shot in the arm and a boost to the business.
Karan Johar was on this show and he talked about how, and he said it on multiple platforms, that basically now the stars, like you said, are actually asking for so much that they throw the entire budget of the film out the window because a large chunk of that budget now needs to go to this one big star or the two big stars. How do you navigate? Is that true in your experience?
It'll probably be, again, there is, I think, pay disparity between men and women on that level. But I think I think he's right.
So then how do you navigate that?
I think the kind of pressure that they're putting on budgets, and it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I think the amount of, the kind of fees people are getting paid. Of course, you are the bankable star and you are kind of ensuring this project gets made. But there's also a producer, there's a director, there's a writer. There's the entire rest of the cast, rest of the crew. Everybody needs to make some money. And at the end of the day, the producer still has to kind of sell this and recover all that money. So I think that somewhere this is running the business to the ground, honestly.
Okay.
I do think that.
And how do you see that evolving? Because it's going to have to, it'll crack at some point, right?
I think it's already cracked.
It's already cracked.
We are seeing that.
Okay.
There is, I think COVID had a lot to do with people not really coming to the theatres. But once that kind of, when you see a lot of superbly packaged films that are bombing, so people are not really being able to kind of justify the amount of money that they're asking for. And to my thinking, I think that they need to take a hard look at themselves, because it's not just the fees, it's also the paraphernalia that goes with it. And it's I personally think it's quite it is kind of, it's not a good thing for the industry at all.
Right now, if we look at the re-releasing that's happening in the theatres, is there a reason in your mind why the theatres need to re-release old films? Are we not making enough films for the theatres? What's going on? What has changed?
I'm glad, firstly, that films are being re-released. I think some of them are films that were just appreciated. Some of them are films that came out at a time like, say, COVID, when people were not watching. So for whatever reason, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I think films have a shelf life, and that is one of the prerequisites for me of a good film. Will it live? And some films do live, and they live for...
Will you still love it 20 years from now?
Yeah. So I think that's a good trend. In terms of, are they, like you're saying, there is a perception, I think, that theatrical is difficult to do. It's not just a perception, it's a reality. I know this because so many people are like, you're like coming to theaters, why not OTT? And somebody said, you're so brave. I started laughing. I was like, I'm not brave. My partners are brave.
Yeah.
Amazon MGM is brave, Excel, all of us. I mean, I do see that it's getting increasingly more and more difficult for films to get a theatrical release. And that's also because so many films are not working. And maybe, every once in a while you have to do a bit of soul searching and look at what kind of work you're producing. Are you actually being able to connect to people? Because films are made for people.
I've always thought it was really interesting that your work, especially for example, Made in Heaven, if we take Made in Heaven, that there's a gay character, there's now a trans character, there are older people, younger people. It's just like a cross section of society. Is that a conscious decision that we should have representation, or just evolves like that?
It just evolves like that.
But it doesn't for everybody else. I mean, we're coming from an industry where all lead characters were this guy called Rahul, whose second name didn't matter because they were all identical. To a point where,
I know, but see, I can speak only for myself and the work I do with Zoya. It's not... I personally feel that you have to be authentic. The writing has to be authentic. And for that, you have to have a very authentic relationship with what you're putting out. So we never try to say write women characters, or we never try to be inclusive. I think it just comes out. Because what you are kind of comes out in your pages.
And do you, when you write these characters, is there someone in your office saying, oh, this is going to turn into a controversy? Can you not do this?
Not in our office, but eventually, I'm not going to lie about it. There are, at the end of it, before coming out, you could have partners who might call things out. They might have concerns. Given the times we live in, they might even be valid concerns. So things like that do come up and they have to be dealt with. Again, I just try to remain true to what we're doing and not worry about the rest of it. But yeah, these are thoughts in people's heads.
Actually, I do want to ask you this, though. You and Zoya have been working together now for, do you know how long it's been? 15 years?
More than that.
More than that.
We've always been, we met as ADs.
Right.
And we
tell me how you met.
It's really funny. I was working with Kazat Gustar on Bombay Boys. And Zoya knew that she wanted to be a filmmaker, but most filmmakers would meet her to cast her for I don't know what reason. Okay. So, but she really wanted a job on Bombay Boys. So she decided to take Kazat's call to come in for an audition so she could pitch for a job as an AD. And Kazat said, I've got Zoya in and she's going to read this scene and you have to read the scene with her. So I think he was testing her for, the part that Tara Deshpande played eventually.
Okay.
And I was standing in for Rahul Bose. So the two of us did this scene together. And at the end of it, she was like, you're the world's worst actor. And I was like, Zoya, I don't think you're going to get the job either. So, but from that came a deep friendship. And we just bonded because, I like to write, she liked to write. We kind of like the same kind of films, similar worldviews, similar values. So, and we just kind of organically started writing together. The first thing we wrote was a short film script that we decided to co-direct. And obviously, because of that decision, the film has never seen. We never went to the shoot only. We had so many differences that we kind of stopped speaking for a month. But we realized that there was something in writing together, So then we our first films, we never took credit because we were like, this is our first film and you should take credit alone. And But there were several scenes that Zoya wrote in Honeymoon Travels. Okay. And similarly, there were several scenes that I kind of helped with in Luck by Chance. So because writing is such a lonely process that I was very, very grateful to find this person who, and it's interesting because we have such different experiences of where we came from and all of that. It was so different that it kind of gave a more rounded view of the world, And because I think Zoya grew up in a world that I had no idea about, and I grew up in a world that she had no idea about. So we bring that lived experience to the table, and we kind of wrote Talash together. That was the first script that we wrote together. And since then, we just, it came very organically, kind of the partnership. So then, because it went well, we wrote another one, and then we wrote another one, and then like that, we became a well-oiled machine that Tiger Baby is founded on.
That's brilliant. So, in your journey of the last 15, 20 years, how do you keep the partnership current, in the sense that have there been moments where you've had such nasty fights that you were like, I'm never going to work with her again? Or have you guys never been through that? And it's always been
of course. I mean,
smooth sailing.
It doesn't get that nasty, but we say this to each other very regularly. And
this is it. I'm never working with you again.
Yeah. We have, I mean, but I think that's because, see, if they're two heads, then they should be different.
Both creative heads, right?
And they should be having different points of view, because that's the advantage. If you were two mini-me's of each other, what's the point? Then one of you might as well write alone.
Because the interesting thing of most of these businesses, you have the creative content person and you have a suit. And then the fights are always about, but this doesn't make sense, and you're just you're being an artist and you're not thinking about the money. But in this case...
No, in that sense, I think Zoya and I are unique, because it's never about that fight.
Yeah.
That fight is, okay, you want to do this? You believe in it, I believe in it. Let's come up with a strategy where we can make this happen. Our fights are always creative. So like when we were writing Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara, the neighbors call Honey Auntie, Zoya's mother, because we were writing at home. And they were like, Honey, aapka ghar mein sab theek hai? Because we were shouting at each other so much. So Honey Auntie was like, if you're going to shout like this, go to the office and write. So yeah, we do. Also, we're friends, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so we have all the mutual disrespect that friends have for each other. So yeah.
So, on a personal front, living in Mumbai can be a very fulfilling experience, but also a very lonely experience. Because most of us leave our families back home, we come here by ourselves. What have your friendships meant to you in this journey of making Mumbai your home, putting down roots, building a life here?
I've actually had a very, very good experience of Mumbai, the film industry. You do have ups and downs. Filmmaking is, it's difficult business, and you are going to have ups and downs. I'm not saying, everything is going to be happy and all of that. But having said that, I think the city, I love this city. I love the energy of this city. I love the industry. When I was going to make my first film, it was a struggle because it was an alternative film. But I reached out to everybody, and everybody met me, gave me a chance, gave me a hearing. So I felt very respected in that sense. And yes, it is a city where you can feel lonely. But I think I'm a bit of a loner, so that's not a problem for me. But and I do, obviously, your friends here become your family.
So on this show, I always ask very successful people about failure. Okay. If you were to think back on your career, is there a moment of failure that you remember that was particularly painful?
Well, I mean, the most painful, I would say, films fall through all the time. But there was a film I was going to do. We had done everything. Recce's, crew. I mean, we were ready to go. And about 15 days before the shoot, it got called off. I was so into that film and so into I thought I was going to make it. You know what I'm saying? We were all together working, we had figured out how we were going to shoot scenes. And then it got called off. So that was very hard. But again, you just have to give yourself time to obviously feel bad and feel low and pamper yourself a little bit. But eventually you just have to get up and move on.
And what is get up and move on like? So, you're working on this thing, and a lot of us who have other jobs don't realize that pre-production on a film could take years. And then you finally get to the point and say, okay, we're going to shoot our first shot now. You do your Murat, you're ready, all of those things are sorted. And then 15 days before that, you're saying it got called off. When you wake up the next morning, how do you convince yourself that okay, this thing that I invested so much time in is gone?
I mean, I think that's where having friends in the business helps. You know, the friends to me have always pulled me out of this kind of thing. There's always Zoya who's like, get up and let's do this. Or Farhan and Ritesh have been very supportive, and I think that failure is the first step to success. Because when you look back, retrospect is always 2020. But when you constantly kind of, like they say, success has many fathers and failure has none. But I think failure teaches you a lot more than success. It just teaches you to be a better person. Because I think success makes your head big. And failure kind of makes you realize how it must be for people around. And how you should be good to everybody, not just successful people, but also people who have failed, who might have the potential for success later. I think that's a very important lesson. You get to look at why, I think that at some point, part of this getting up and moving on process, you have to look back at why you failed and identify that problem and fix that. So, I think that you have to fail to succeed. Because in my understanding, I think that unless you go through a process like this and you just have one big kind of success at the beginning of your career, and then the rest of it is a possibility that the rest of your career could also
flatlines.
Yeah. So I think failure is good. It energizes people. It makes you rethink. It forces you to reimagine yourself. It forces you to get out of your comfort zone. And these are things that grow people and hopefully lead them to success. So I'm I value my failures, I really value my failures. I do.
And do you, when you say you have to figure out how you fail, so is that like a nearly scientific academic process for you where you sit down and say, okay, let me figure out what went wrong here? Am I actually going to dedicate time to break that down, or is it just constantly in the back of your head that you're thinking about it?
Yeah, you do. If a film, say, doesn't land, some films land, some films don't. If something doesn't land, you have to think about what you could have done better. You have to. And you have to take people's feedback. That's the one thing that I love about social media, is that you get, when you put out a film and people like put it out on Twitter or Insta. I'm talking about genuine user reviews. I'm not talking about hate and stuff like that. I find that very constructive.
So actually, of all of the work that you've done in your career, Archie's perhaps got trolled most on social media. People felt that, these are star kids and they were not ready, and they were, there were some questions about whether or not they were acting adequately. So initially, I remember when I read that the two of you are doing Archie's, I was like, how are they going to pull this off? Because how do you make that work in an Indian context? Like, how will you do the language, the setting, all of that?
Yeah.
But I don't think there were questions about that at all, because by the time it came out, people bought the concept. It was the idea of why are Reema and Zoya launching Star Kids, and why did it seem like, they could have done better with different actors. What was your response to that? Is that something you took on board as feedback, or you knew?
Again, you have to differentiate between constructive criticism and hate.
Okay.
I'm very thick-skinned. Okay. I just switch off from hate. And I think it's horrible what happened. Honestly, I don't think that was called for. And having said that, of course, I've looked back and looked at the things that we could have done better. And a lot of people maybe, said something, said things that spoke to me. And Zoya and I have spoken about Archie's and what happened. And we both feel like maybe we could have written this differently, or we could have done that differently. But in terms of the hate that Suhana, Khushi and Agastya received, I mean, these are young people. And they were adults saying such mean things to them that I think as a society, we need to look at ourselves. It was cruel. I do not support that kind of thing at all. And having said that, you watch the film, you didn't like it, you want to tell me what you didn't like about it, I'm happy to speak about that. But this whole nepotism thing that we speak about, I mean, let me ask you, when the first promo came out, we introduced 7 kids. But nobody even remembered the other 4's names.
Yeah.
And all you wanted to talk about were the 3 people.
Yeah.
So this is coming from something. It's coming from the fact that the audience reacts to people like this. You know what I'm saying? You have a star child, a producer's feeling like this person is already known. And you are also running to...
You're responding to them more.
Yeah. Why are 2-3-year-old children of stars? Their parents don't want to put them on there. Why are you as a country obsessed with them? I'm not taking names, but we know. Do you know what I'm saying? Why are we doing that? Nepotism exists in every field of life. I'm not support. It's not a good thing. But none of these 3 people's parents were actually funding the film or doing anything like that.
Yeah. It's perfectly acceptable in India that Supreme Court judges have kids who become Supreme Court judges. And doctors have kids who become doctors. And lawyers have kids who become lawyers. But somehow in this one particular space...
I think this whole nepotism, insider, outsider, these kind of things, according to me, are like a sajish on the industry. I really, take me. Okay, I've come from Assam. I made my first film before Zoya made her first film. She really had it hard. She was, she had probably had the script ready. We had it ready around the same time. But she took another 2-3 years to make it. I've seen people struggle around me, whether they are star kids or they're, people who've come from outside of Bombay. Everybody has their own set of challenges. Nobody has it easy. And I think it's a fallacy that people think this one has it easy. Or yes, there are people around here like this. This is the pool, right? There'll be these many kids who want to be actors. Now, half of them will probably have parents who are already actors. Should none of them act? Do you know what I'm saying? What it's making this argument makes no sense to me. And I could go on about this. I think you should move on to next question.
I do want to ask you this because I said very interestingly that you could tell the difference between the hate and the constructive feedback, which I find interesting because I spend a large portion of my time wading through hate and constructive feedback. How do you tell the difference between the two?
It's speaking to you. Something is making sense and something is feeling like, what's going on? Why would you say something so cruel to a 22-year-old or a 21-year-old? And when I'm looking at your profile, you're some 40-year-old person. What's going on?
Yeah.
So I think that in this time of social media, everybody should little bit try and be as nice as they are personally.
Yeah. Someone said that before you write something,
as they are on platforms.
Think if you would say this to this person or to their face if you met them.
Yeah. So, if anything, I think people should just try and not behave like their social media accounts are,
separate.
But I guess I was watching the Simone Biles documentary and there she talks about, she won the Olympic. And people are talking about her hair. Women. Kabaddi got her hair. So it's that mindless,
And if it's... This is the interesting bit, right? We're now talking about mental health in sports because of women like Simone Biles, because of women like Naomi Osaka who said that, I'm going to take a break because this is not okay. And everybody called them weak and said, how can they possibly make this decision? But now we have male sports people saying, mental health is a thing and, the way we are being spoken to and the way our careers are being treated is not okay. And I think that that's a really powerful thing. And when we consider these 20-year-olds who enter the industry and their entire lives are now, the public is dissecting the shape of their noses and the shape of their faces and what they are and are not doing. And everybody now has a camera. So there's no space and a voice. So there's no space where you can just let your guard down. Ever. It's,
unless you're thick-skinned like me. Yeah. Because, honestly, I think that at some point, people are going to start regulating social media because it's required. Like I remember reading somewhere that in Australia, they're banning it for people under 16, for children under 16. I think that social media is still very new. And as people progress and you kind of see the effect it's having, there are going to be rules, there are going to be, regulations. I don't know what they're going to do about the older people, but I hope that young minds are not kind of... Yeah.
I do want to ask you this, though, as someone who creates content and someone who's such a strong voice for writers, do you think we're thinking enough about the impact of AI on our work? Because in the West, they are. About IP, about plagiarism, about using work for generative AI, about protecting the rights of writers.
I mean, I think technically it is possible to get kind of written as an experiment, because when I don't know what we were promoting, maybe during the Kho Gaya Hum Kahan promotions, somebody actually asked me, do you use AI to write? And I was like, what? You mean like use ChatGPT to write? And it was very funny. So I was like, so I'm going to go home and try this. So I did put it in. I was like, write a script like Zoya Akhtar and Reema Kagti, and something pretty ridiculous came up. But I think that if I had given it more specific clues and kind of guided it better, technically you would be able to do that. I in fact met a filmmaker recently who said that they have a very good sequel idea that they got from ChatGPT. So I don't know, people are doing it, but I maybe I'm arrogant enough to believe that you do need the human touch, and you do. Everything can't be a derivative of something, right? And art, in that sense, it's about new things that keep coming up. So, I mean, I can only feed in what has already come out in the past. I can feed in clues like that. But art is constantly changing, and new stuff is coming out and has to come out for things to grow.
Okay, I want your advice. And not just for people who are making films, but for people who have decided, okay, this is what I'm going to do with my life. And they're in that starting position where you have to tell yourself every day that, no, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to give up. What held you on course?
I think that I was so in love with films that I couldn't think of anything else, And if you feel that kind of conviction about something, you should definitely attempt to do it. I mean, you have one life. Come on. You have to.
Yeah. Actually, Shabana Azmi on this show said something similar, but from a different perspective. And she said, I tell people that you should only do it if this is an obsession, if you cannot live without doing this. Only then get some. This is so hard that you're not going to survive otherwise.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you definitely have to love it to do it, And as a writer and a filmmaker, you end up spending 2-3 years with something. So you really have to have a very strong relationship with it to kind of sustain yourself. Yeah. So for sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All the best.